And you look back over the span of your life and you begin to see how those turning points were moments that really made you who you are. They begin to define you. What carried you during those times? So
Hello, writers and crafters. I'm Valerie Isan,
And I'm Eric Mertz.
and this is episode 199 of the podcast. I don't know, we're going to have to do something like wild and crazy for 200, but that's next week, and I haven't even thought about it, so probably
We'll have to
not.
license some sound effects and just like it's New Year's or something.
It is September 17th, 2025, as we record this. September's kind of a new year. Like, that's a real thing. I always feel like it's a new year in September. So maybe.
School started. That's all I care.
Cool.
That's all that matters. School started.
Today, we're talking about intentionality in writing. We're here with guest Hendrika de Vries, and we're going to be touching on resistance and feminism and telling the truth in your memoirs and in your writing. And it's going to be a really fun conversation. So I can't wait to get into that. But first, let's do a few housekeeping things. Thank you to our existing patrons for supporting us here on the podcast and also in our writing lives. You can become a patron of the arts by going to patreon.com/Valerie Isan, IHSAN, and patreon.com/Strange Air Stories. You'll find lots of goodies over there, instruction, coaching, planning, short stories, books. It's going to be great. Head on over there, find a tier you like, and there's always free tier options as well. All right. My author update is all about the yard sale.
Oh boy.
I'm having
You're
a
selling
yard
story ideas. I love
sale
it.
for the first time in like, I don't know, 30 years or something. So I had to go to the office supply store and get like the garage sale signs and the little stickers that
Oh
are all
yeah.
the different colors. And my husband Ali was like, I don't know if we should even price anything. Let's just put everything out there and they can ask. So maybe I've eliminated a little bit of a job for me, but yeah, we're
They're
having
gonna
it
ask
Friday and
anyway.
Saturday. Yeah, probably.
They're gonna
So
ask anyway.
that gives me 2 more days to like haul all the stuff out, and I feel like very ill prepared. So I'm going to be working hard. As soon as this podcast is done recording, I'm going to be like dragging furniture out to the carport and, all of that stuff. So that's basically what I'm doing with my time these days is prepping for this yard sale, deciding what we're not taking with us to Costa Rica. And I'm also planning a free masterclass on hybrid memoir writing. That's going to be on
Ooh.
October 8th. So more on that later. Follow me on the socials, sign up for my newsletter. That's where all of the information will be about that. What about you, Eric? What's up?
Well, last weekend I was at the Southwest Washington
Oh
Writers Conference in
yeah.
good old Centralia, which was fun. I love the small town writers conference. I love it. Everybody there knows each. I walked in the door. Here's what happened. I walk in the door, and Julie Zander, who runs comes up to me and gives me a hug. Everybody that I knew, like I met last year, remembered me. It's like, I don't know. I don't think you get that when you go to the big city conferences. I don't think you
Mm-hmm.
get that at like. So it was a good conference. I mean, I definitely, I always go to the conference circuit and feel like I'm sort of I hate to say this, but like kind of measuring, like, okay, here's what I'm doing, here's what, the other people who are presenting are doing, and um, how can I tweak my process? So,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, so I'm going to be working on just some new conference pitches. I think I've kind of there's some things I've taught that I've run the course with. I'm done doing them. Um,
That's a
so
really
yeah,
good
I'm going to be
idea
kind of.
because I feel like that's kind of where I've stalled out in the last couple of years. All of the conferences I'm pitching don't seem quite as like excited about the topic, and I think it's because it's run its course and I need to find a new way to spin it.
Yeah, yeah. Here's what I did because here was the blessing too. Here's the you've won the conference presenter lottery.
Mm.
Mine was they had the keynote speakers and then they had one section between the keynote speakers and lunch that was my section. So I didn't have to deal with the after lunch lull. I didn't have to deal with the end of the day go home earlies. I had everybody's focus and attention. But the rest of the afternoon, I just looked at the program and thought, what are they missing? What can I present for, create for next
Mm.
year? Maybe not at that conference, although um, I love that conference. They're just such nice people. If I get
Yeah.
a free hug out of it, I'm gonna go. But yeah, other than that, I'm running some ads. I have new ads on my site, and that has been I don't know if anybody's run Google ads out there, but when you run Google ads, like you just get this crazy amount of traffic, and it's all because Google's trying to figure out your ad. Like, okay, where do I serve this? And it's been wild, kind of
And
sitting
that's
on the back
for the
end watching.
ghostwriting.
Ghostwriting and editing. I've got a new editing ad that's just popping off and it's kind of fun. I like this part of the marketing. I don't like trying to figure out what the keywords are, but I like watching the like, okay, what's working, what's not working, and kind of strategizing. That's my favorite part of the behind the scenes stuff. So I enjoy it.
That's cool. Hendrika, what
Yeah.
about you? What's up in your writer world?
I'm just listening to the two of you and just so enjoying hearing you talk about writing and your memoirs. I was looking up your memoirs, Valerie, and just thinking about writers' conferences. I've been going to the writers' conferences here in Santa Barbara for years now, and it's such a lovely community. It's like Erick is saying, I get there and everyone's hugging and we're all talking about what we're working on and how do we market? You
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah.
just listening to the two of you, it's like, yeah, let me just sit here and drink my coffee and you guys just talk. I'll listen.
I think at the writers conference there's just 1 minute where there's just like a minute every conference where everyone is equal. Whether or not you're a presenter or the keynote speaker or the organizer or your first conference, everyone is there and they're drinking coffee and they're like that's just magic. It doesn't happen like that for writers
Yeah.
often.
I
So,
often like the equalizing thing for me is remembering that a lot of writers have lean on the introvert side.
Yeah.
So whenever I
oh,
feel
really?
awkward and uncomfortable, I'm like, you know what? Probably everybody else in this room does too. So it's okay that you
Right, right.
feel a little weird.
I just had a lovely experience with that because tend to be very introverted. And I went to the Chicago Lit Fest and Printers Row Lit Fest just last week. And there was a whole half a tent of She Writes Press authors, and we all
Hmm.
met for the first time in person. We had met on Zoom. And I'm sitting there between two younger writers who one had already written several books and the other one, and I'm kind of sitting there with my books as people walk by. And these two are more extroverted. And one is saying, say this. And the other one is showing me how to do it. And it was just lovely because I really got that feeling of how we're all writing our stories. We're all trying to, get our stories out there. And it was just a really sweet moment of feeling their energy move me along.
Yeah,
So
that's
just
wonderful.
just it was just a really great experience.
Yeah, they say if you're an introvert, find an extroverted friend when you're at a party and just follow
There you
them
go.
around.
There you go. Yeah, I had two more extroverted women on my side, and it really made a difference.
Do you know,
Yeah.
I feel kind of sort of halfway in between. What do they call that? An ambivert or something? I don't know. But I, I do like public speaking. I do love teaching. And so I don't have any problem like being on a stage or teaching somebody something. It's just that small talky sort of like, I don't know what I'm supposed to
Oh,
be
that's so
doing
tiring.
here.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
So
but
tiring.
I have discovered though that after I speak, like if I'm at a conference and I've taught a couple classes or whatever, then when it's that in between milling around and people are getting to the next place or whatever, or it's lunchtime, I can be less, I don't know, I feel less awkward because I have a role. And so I'm standing over here just kind of watching and people might come up to me and talk to me about what I just spoke about or whatever. And I don't know, that feels like the entry point. I don't have I don't have to come up with what to say, I guess is the thing.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm pretty much the same way. I taught for 20 years and love teaching. I love public speaking, actually. But
Hmm.
like I think you just pinpointed it. It's like then I have a role
Hmm.
and I feel comfortable in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm the extrovert that gets dragged around, like at the party. I think people assume that I'm an extrovert.
That's why
And
you
I
were
think
my
like,
conference buddy for so many years, Eric. You didn't
oh
know
my God,
that?
I am like a shield. Like I think I go through, but here's what happens to me every time. Like I have all this energy. Conference doors open at 8 and they close at 5. At 5:01, I got in my car and I to leave, and I was just like I went, my energy just dropped. Like
Yeah.
not, I was just gonna say dangerously. That sounds so dramatic, but like I could feel the like
You
just
took
from the
off the
walk through the
mask.
doors.
Like, okay, I don't have to
Ooh,
talk to anybody. I can just listen to a podcast
whoa.
and turn
Yeah.
the AC
Yeah,
on.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a weird yeah, energy is just such a weird thing. We could sit here and probably talk about it for days. It's such an odd.
Yeah. Isn't that true? Yeah.
So I am just like a chapter away, Eric, from
Oh
finishing
no.
High Hopes by Anne Abel. She's another podcast guest that's coming on next month. And so I wanted to read her new memoir before she came on. So I finally have just about finished that. And now I'm looking at two other memoirs, but I'm kind of like jonesing for fiction a little bit too. So I don't know my next read. I have a little short stack that I'm gonna like lean towards. One is I'm finding all these road trip books because epic road trip coming soon. So one is called Land Without a Continent. It's a road trip through Mexico and Central America, which sounds like the perfect thing I should be
Naturally.
reading. And then the other one is Rachael Herron's book, Unstuck. That was when she decided with her wife to leave the Bay Area and move to New Zealand. Kind of like just drop her life and start over in New Zealand. So also mindset, like kind of in my wheelhouse right now. So those are the two memoirs that I'm thinking of reading. But Rachel just came out with her newest magical realism book. I think it's called The Seven Miracles of, oh my gosh, I should have written
Beatrix
that.
Holland.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
had I've had that since the day it published, and I've been like eagerly awaiting the cracking of the spine. But I don't know if it's going to be that one or if it's going to be the memoir. So that's my short
Hmm.
stack. What are you reading?
I'm reading Voices of the Fire by Alan Moore. I've been wanting to read this book for years. I mean, Alan Moore is like a great comic book artist, and this is one of his novels. It's sort of a novel. It's a novel told in 11 short stories. It's just one of those books I've heard talked about in the kind of weird fiction, fantasy, horror circles for decades. People have talked about this book, so I finally bought a copy. Um, I am also reading a book called Lost in the Dark by John Langan, which are short stories. And I needed something really light for my audiobook listening, so I'm listening to a book about Gettysburg. Um,
That's so light.
eh,
That's
it's
like,
called The Last Invasion by Alan Guelzo. It's really great. It's a great book. I mean, I'm really enjoying it. But I'm like, how did I go from like light fare on the audio to Gettysburg? So.
I actually am going to need some recommendations for audiobooks because I told Ali we were driving to Albany to visit my dad just last week, and I encouraged him to have us listen to a podcast episode on the way. And I was like, can we always listen to music? And it's usually his playlist. Sometimes I can, if we're on a longer drive, I get my playlist to play because I need a different kind of music to stay awake, when I'm driving and be engaged in the road. And so, and whoever's driving, of course, gets, they get the air the right way, they get the music the right way because it's
Oh,
important for the driver to be, comfortable. So that's the rules in our car. But I encouraged him to let me listen to a podcast episode because I said, like, we're going to be spending 3 weeks in the car together. I'm not going to listen to music the entire time. Like I'm going to want to listen to an audiobook, some podcast episodes. Let's trial and error this. Like I have noise canceling headphones. I can listen to it myself. You know, he can listen to music and I can listen to a podcast, but I don't want to spend 3 weeks with my noise canceling headphones on and not engaging with him. You know what I mean? That's part of the fun
Yeah.
of this epic road trip is to, the adventure of it. So I am going to need, I have hundreds of audiobooks on my phone. But I think that none of them might be interesting to him. Like, so I need some like, what do you listen to with your family, in the car?
Oh, I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
Oh,
Bring
you
us.
were asking, like
Yeah, I'm gonna need recommendations, man.
My
I
my
am the last
first
person you asked that.
my first book, When a Toy Dog Became a Wolf and the Moon
Mhm.
Broke Curfew. It's about my childhood in World War II Amsterdam,
There you
and
go.
it's on audio. So
Okay,
that
awesome. We'll check
yeah.
out.
Yeah, and it's really, people have said that they really like the audio version of it.
Cool.
So, and I think your dad, this is for your dad, right? He would probably appreciate it.
Oh no, it's for me for driving to Costa Rica with my
Yeah.
husband.
Oh, your
Yeah,
husband.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so he'd like it too. It's a really good audio.
Nice. Well, we'll definitely link to that in the show notes.
Yeah. It's,
What are you reading? What are you reading, Hendrika?
well, since I've been writing and I just had my book launch for Open Turns, I've mostly, and it's about swimming in Australia. I've been kind of catching up on books about swimming. So I read Vicki Valosik's book, Swimming Pretty. It's all about the history of aquatic swimming.
Mm,
Swimming and ballet swimming, and how the whole sort of artistic movement of swimming, how it developed. It's
mm,
it's a great book. Her research about it and the history of what women had to deal with in bringing that into the swimming world, and realizing that you needed to be a really strong swimmer
yeah, I
to be
bet.
able to do the aquatic swim. I was a competitive swimmer and I tried aquatic swimming, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I think I'll just get back in the lane and just swim. I'm a good strong swimmer, but this diving down deep and lifting your legs up and everything, that's a little much. But
It's a
that's a
different
really
kind of athleticism, I guess.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
a great book. And then Bonnie Tsu's book, Why We Swim, is a book that really talks about how we lose our differences and how
Mm,
we come together in the water. And I had that experience. I talk about it in my book, Open Turns, and uh, how that happened for me as an immigrant in Australia, that I could forget the trauma from my childhood in World War II, and I could forget that I was adapting to a new country. I could just be a swimmer, and we
mm,
and we were all in the water together, and how differences just ebbed away. So
mm,
kind of
mhm.
in sort of filling myself with those books. But there's one book that is really, it's a novel. It's called Black Cake, and I think the author is
Oh,
Wilkerson. And now I forget her first name, unfortunately. It's a novel, and it's also about what the protagonist is a swimmer. I'd really recommend that. That's a great little novel. And the other two are nonfiction. So that's where
awesome.
I've been, in the water,
You've been in the water.
in the water.
That's great. That's great. Well, Eric, do you have any resources, tips, tidbits, anything else you want to talk about before we get into the meat of the episode?
Not today. I'm all out
Okay.
of tips. Read
All
your
out of
conference
tips.
program when you attend. Well, there's your tip, I guess.
All right. And Hendrika de Vries is a retired family therapist, a teacher, and a writer, chronicling her life experiences with oppression and resistance in Nazi occupied Amsterdam, migration, competitive swimming, and misogyny in 1950s Australia. A fierce feminist and activist, De Vries infuses her writing with historical depth, and personal perspective on challenges facing women and anyone deemed other. She's the author of When a Toy Dog Becomes a Wolf and the Moon Broke Curfew, award-winning memoir of her World War II childhood. Her writing has also appeared in the New York Times and the LA Times. She lives in Santa Barbara, California, and you can find out more about her at agirlfromamsterdam.com. She's widely award winning. She's won the 2019 Mary Sarton Women's Book Award winner, the 2019 Nautilus Award for Memoir and Personal Journey Nonfiction Author Association Gold winner, 2020 Erick Hoffer First Horizon and Culture Award winner, the 2020 Next Generation Indie Book Award finalist in memoirs, and the 2021 New York City Big Book Awards winner in memoir and young adult nonfiction. Such a bio. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Hendrika.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. And it's a joy.
So many things to ask.
Where do you begin?
I know. So your memoirs are, of course, I mean, I'm a memoir writer too. So is Erick as a ghostwriter. We've all written memoir. Memoir is about remembering. It's about kind of like reclaiming who you are or deciding if you're a new person or how that change happens. And those are some of the reasons why I love to read memoir, just as a genre that I like. So, but because your work does have a lot to do with, some of the things in your bio that you talked about, the misogyny and the activism that comes out in your work. So, when did you first realize, I guess, that your stories were not just personal, but kind of, I guess, political, like that. And we were talking about intentionality in writing. So how did intentionality shape your writing, I guess?
That's such a great question. And it's actually kind of a long story. Um, I always wanted to write, but then I got married. In Australia, we moved, we had children, and life got very busy. But then I became a teacher and a therapist. And I started using my childhood experiences as psychological examples, like of resilience and strengths, and how do we go through difficult times? Because I was a little girl in Nazi-occupied Amsterdam, and my mother hid a Jewish girl and joined the resistance movement. And so it was a powerful story about how do we move through difficult times. And the examples would fit in my teaching and in my work. Then I was asked to write articles, so I wrote some articles about it. So it kind of evolved, and I always felt like writing a memoir about it felt a little self-indulgent, and was like, yeah, these are experiences and maybe they can be helpful to other people, but I just procrastinated about writing the actual memoir. But then in 2017, when I saw neo-Nazis walking in Charlottesville, Virginia, then I suddenly realized that it was an important story, that something that I thought would not happen again was happening again in human history. And so that's when I decided to put together the memoir, the first memoir, and publish it. And it was an incredible success. You read all the awards. I was so surprised actually how well it was received and how many people responded to it. And then people wanted a sequel. And I'm going, no. And Valerie, I know you've written several memoirs. I was going through them and really being impressed with how much you've written. And I'm going, no, I cannot write another memoir, please. And then, they said, but what happened when you moved to Australia? Because our family emigrated to Australia several years after World War II. What was it like to be immigrants in Australia? What did you were a swimmer? Did you go to the Olympics? When are you going to write the story? So eventually, I first thought about it, I thought, yeah, well, I was 13 when we moved to Australia. I'm a teenager in Australia in the 1950s. Why would that be of any interest to anyone today? And then I started sort of thinking about the themes of loss of everything, adaptation, belonging, resilience to reinvent yourself. And at the time, I was a therapist for 30 years, and I thought, these are themes that I've seen in my clients have lost their homes in the fires or in other natural
Hmm.
disasters, or they've lost loved ones and they've had to deal with loss. And how do you adapt, and what sustains us when we make these huge changes? So that book got conceived and open turns because I started thinking about all these are the big turning points in our lives. How do we create these turning points? What do they mean in our lives? And I realized how much they define who we are. And when you look back, I'm obviously I'm older because I lived through World War II as a child. And you look back over the span of your life and you begin to see how those turning points were moments that really made you who you are. They begin to define you. What carried you during those times? So that's how the book Turning Points got born. I started writing the story.
So I'm hearing that when you're taking, as writers, when we're taking our personal stories, in order to make them more accessible to our readers and to put that intentionality into our writing, we can do that by asking ourselves these thematic questions like how is this relatable to someone else? Like, what is this universal truth statement, that we're making about our lives in the world, and pointing out like where things are broken, I guess, and and centering the examples from our life around those questions in order to make it more relatable to the reader. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
because it's their, ultimately they're not just our stories. What we're talking about. How does it impact others? How have other people experienced this? And immigration of moving from one place to another can be seen as okay, only immigrants who physically move from one country to another. But when you really think about it, we move from one place to another when we've lost our home in a disaster, or when we lose someone. And I had clients who would lose a spouse, and suddenly, who am I when I'm a widow or widower,
Mm-hmm.
or physical ailments. So yeah, looking at how our story relates to the human story and where and how, I think is really important in writing.
One quick follow-up question. So this intention then of I really like what you said there, how our story relates to the human story. So we've chosen the scene, then maybe, okay, this is the scene I want to write in my memoir because it relates to the human experience in this way with this theme and blah, blah, blah. But then at that point, when you have chosen the scene you want to write, how does a writer's intentionality shape that scene, the voice, the structure of the scene, I guess? I wonder.
For me, what happened, and I don't know if this exactly answers your question, but in the first book, I very much allowed the little girl who was experiencing the trauma to have a voice because there was a she had experiences of trauma that I felt would be experienced by readers who had
Hmm.
gone through trauma. Maybe not war trauma, maybe not trauma of oppression in the way she did, but it was a voice that gave trauma an image and allows other people to connect with the resilience behind the trauma. So, and in this current book in Open Turns, I really I struggled with it actually because it's the voice of an adolescent, and it's a
Hmm.
little harder to give an adolescent a voice in your writing than a sweet little girl that is being traumatized. So, but the I allowed the adolescent to have her voice because in the writing I discovered that her self-doubts, her introspection, her anger really speaks to those inner experience, those psychological moments we all have when life changes on a dime. It's like, who are we? Where are we? And of course, this is the voice of an adolescent, but she's an immigrant and she's very introspective. And it's been shown, I was a therapist, immigrants often are more introspective because our roots lie in other parts of the world. Um, she's a young girl becoming a woman, so she's dealing with all the whole issues of what's a woman's place in the world. Now, this is 1950s, but we're asking the same questions today again as we're seeing some pressures around what happens. When laws are changed or rules are changed, what's a girl's place? And then she was an athlete, so she's dealing with the whole attitude of, and this was, of course, the 1950s, but even today we're seeing some of the same things happening. What happens when a girl becomes an athlete? So it's very much written from that perspective of experiences that, yes, were experiences of an adolescent girl in the 1950s in Australia, but the readers will find their own experiences in her voice because of the human emotions and themes.
As a therapist,
Mhm.
how how did you navigate writing? I don't know how to say this. So obviously we want to write relatable characters and we want to move our readers. But how do we write about trauma without re-traumatizing ourselves and also the reader?
Yeah. Well, first of all, my both my books are very much about human resilience. I come from a very strong line of or a line of strong women, and starting with my grandmother, nobody allowed victimhood in our family. So it was that just wasn't allowed. And so both my books have a core of how do we find our strengths and our resilience in trauma. And I've been told I tell a good story. So I was just my Open Turns was just launched here at the bookstore in Santa Barbara, and uh, what was just so wonderful to hear was that everyone liked the story. They said the story was good; it carried it forward. And one person said, it has a positive ending. It shows the strengths that we can get through difficulties and find the good moments. We all have, even in trauma, we have the moments of tenderness and the moments of humor. Um, I think it was the Kirkus review or one of the other reviews that there was like tenderness and humor in my story. So I think we can't just hammer people with the trauma.
Right, yeah.
We have to find that, and in our human lives, we really do bring that complexity. I have one of my friends was in a concentration camp in World War II and came to my reading in this last book, Open Turns, and he said too. He said, you found the lightness, the
Mm.
light in the moments, and so I think when we tell our stories, we can't they if we're for me at least, if I'm writing my story as a story, it can't be a lecture on trauma. It has to
Mm.
be a human story of how
Hmm.
do we humans find our ways. And remember, I'm in my 80s, so I'm looking back and going, how on earth did I have this amazing, long, rich life? And so these moments when I retell them bring that that resilience, that human resilience that's just in us, in our humanity. And I think we sometimes forget it when we get scared or angry, that as human beings, we've always gone through these hard times and come out. So what do we have that carries us forward? And I think that's important in our stories.
Definitely.
I think that goes, you may have partially answered one of the questions I had, and that was, when you talked about seeing the events in Charlottesville and the feeling of disbelief that here we are again, what, 70 years or 60 years later. Like, how can you talk about how one sort of writes from a non-reactionary point of view, place where, I think the instinct is to react and to reject, and there's just a lot of negative feeling that comes out of that. But like, how do you, yeah, just talk about that.
That's great. Yeah. Well, it's the difference between essay and story. If I
Mm.
was writing an essay about what's going on in the world right now, I might be more angry. Might look at why do we human beings not learn from history? I mean, but when I'm writing my memoirs, I'm writing story. I'm wanting people to go along with me in how we go through these times. And yes, we repeat ourselves, but also, you look at human history, we're always repeating ourselves. We don't seem to be learning very much. So how what are the stories in that? And I think our stories, for me, storytelling, and I love novels and I love memoirs with stories. I was looking at yours, Valerie, and just I'm so impressed with how people express their experiences. How do we as humans keep going even
Hmm.
though we keep effing up all the time? It's like we we're so it is the difference between essay and I've written I've written letters to the editors and been angry and how on earth can we do that? But for me that's different from the story in the memoir. The story in the memoir, my this one right now, how does an adolescent girl who moves to a whole new country uh, becomes a swimming champion, swims with Olympians and almost makes it to the Olympic Games, uh, and then finds her way into getting a job that she really wants and falls in love. How does that fit in the difficulties of human life? And I think that's where a story comes in. We connect with the emotional humanity of ourselves that despite everything, when the world is dark, when people are doing stupid things, mean, horrible things, we're divided, that we somehow create a path through that. Um, One of my favorite psychiatrist writers, he just died a few years ago, but is Robert J. Lifton, and he wrote Beyond Our Catastrophes as his last book when he was in his 90s. He wrote other books before that. But he writes about not identifying with victimhood, and he writes about survivors of the Holocaust, of Hiroshima, of COVID, and he fits right in with my family's philosophy. It's like don't get caught in the victimhood because that just doesn't get you anywhere. You can acknowledge the pain and the suffering and all the horrors and be angry, but don't connect with the strength and resilience and the human spirit that keeps creating these stories and moving on. So I don't know, Erick, if that's answering your question at all, but
And then some, and then some. I just think that the tendency, I encounter this a lot when I I when I started doing ghostwriting with people, I think I was out of a business, necessity, like just willing to take any client. But now being more discerning, like I talk to people about their reasons, and I do encounter some people that feel, they're coming from this like very hard reactionary space. It's about, they haven't gotten past that. They haven't embraced the story of survival. It's more about sort of, yeah, so it's something a little more, I think of it as knotty, it's just a little less, it's not smooth. So yeah, that's very
Let
helpful.
let me give you one little example that I often use when I give examples of not getting caught in the victimhood. Um, when I was 2 years old, my grandmother lived in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And when I was 2 years, and she had a beautiful big home in a historic area in Rotterdam. I was 2 years old when Hitler's bombs decimated the city of Rotterdam. My grandma escaped with her life and just her favorite pair of slippers. Everything was gone.
Hmm.
Years later, after the war, I asked her, I said, Grandma, what was that like? You lost your home, you lost your life. She spent the rest of her life in a tiny apartment. And she looked at me and she said, Darling, at least that nasty hair Hitler did not get my favorite slippers, and my feet were warm and cozy. And I always remembered that as, growing up, she gave me that.
Mm,
If she had spent time saying, "Oh, darling, it was so horrible," and everything, I would have been filled with that. I knew it was horrible. I could see her living in her tiny apartment, but what she filled me with was, "Look what happened. I have my slippers. I'm a survivor."
Right.
So
mm.
that's kind of the core of the message that I grew up with. And I think it's a really important message to get when you're young, and I think we need to give our children and grandchildren that. I'm a great grandmother, so I look and go, we've got to give them these stories of hey, you got your favorite slippers.
Right.
I have so many questions and I'm trying to like artfully slide them in. So I can't think of a transition for this one. So I'm just going to say it.
That was the
That
transition.
was
There
the
you go.
transition,
Nice.
not
That was
artful.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Um, when you write about others, you write about people that don't fit in, you write about women in misogynistic cultures. So how can writers stay safe? Like um and be artful about what they're writing about. I don't know how to say that either. Like,
I think you did. I think you did.
I mean, it's not just the vulnerability and personal safety, like inner world, but also like, I mean, you just had that piece published in the New York Times, like
Mhm.
that's really, I mean, that could be dangerous. So how do we as writers um, write these challenging narratives and still be safe, I guess? How do you
Well,
maybe you already answered that with the slippers, like
no,
just focus on the best and hope for the best and say what you have to
well,
say.
no, well, I think, how do I say this? Remember, I grew up, as in my first book is about this, that my mother risked her life and my life as a child to join the resistance movement and hide a Jewish girl in our home. She didn't, and people from the resistance came to our home to listen to the radio, the BBC, because the Dutch Queen was exiled in London, and she would have a radio show to give strength to the people in Holland. But that was, of course, against the rule with the German occupation, and you could lose your life doing that. So
Hmm.
I think measuring the risk, they risked their lives because my mother was actually asked that after the war. How could you have risked your life and your child's life to take that stance in the war. And she said, because I would want my children, my daughter, to grow up in a better world. So I think that's where we take risks, you know. I mean, breathing the air is taking a risk. And I think if we're just going to want to be safe all the time, we're not going to express ourselves at all. Now, mind you, I when I was writing the second book with the from the teenage voice, there were times when I felt so vulnerable and exposed. It's almost like you're living two lives, and you know that,
Yeah.
Valerie, writing a memoir, you
It's
know,
hard to be ugly on the page.
you know, and I'm talking to myself, my teenage self. You
Mm.
really want to say that? We really want to share that? So, and I'm careful not to say anything horrible about people that I know, you
Hmm.
know, in my story. My story is not about blaming, it's
Hmm.
about truth. And Robert J. Lifton says truth telling is an act of activist resistance.
Mm.
And I think and that's um you know, I have Donna Cameron, who's a woman who wrote, I think it was The Year of Living Kindly, or the title is close to that. She was also a She Writes Press author, lovely, lovely person who writes about kindness. And I'm always referred to her little anecdotes. It's like when I write, I try to bring kindness,
Mm.
you know. So
And so balancing that truth telling with kindness and also aligning, like risking you have to live your values.
yeah, yeah, when I wrote, and I wrote a letter to the LA Times about feminism at one point, and I got, there were somebody, they got a hold of my phone number, and I had angry men call, and we talked, and we
Mm.
talked. And, you know, I'll get that. Someone gave me a one-star review because my first book was a political statement, supposedly. Well, yeah, I was talking about Nazis in World War II. Yep, that's kind of political. But, you know, that's a risk I can take. I don't put myself in the firing line, but I do try to speak the truth. And sometimes it's scary. It's,
Mm.
you know, and all the people, I mean, when we speak our truth, we are going to probably annoy some people. And
Just a wee bit.
yeah, but it's, I don't know, does that kind of get to the answer?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, definitely risking
It,
measuring the risk
yeah,
of
yeah,
living your own truth and saying what's true for you versus, okay, this could be life-threatening in
yeah.
some circumstances.
Yeah. When I
Or
was, yeah, you know, I was a swimmer, and I was a swimmer from about age 10. And one of the first things you learn is, as in swimming, of course, is life saving, you know, what
mm,
happens. And you learn that, yeah, when you try to save someone who's drowning, they may try to drown you. And
mm,
it's kind of like look at the risks. What's the value? And like when my mother risked her life in the resistance movement, it was because she really didn't want her children to live in the kind of world that was being created at the time. So the risk was worth it. And I think there is a mindfulness. You know, I think mindfulness is really important today. Where are we and who are we and what's the step we want to take, rather than just writing something because, you know, it makes us feel good or we're angry or something. Being mindful.
mm.
Hmm.
Well, you just brought up swimming, so that totally takes me in a slightly different direction, because I wanted to ask about discipline in your writing too. You know, as an athlete, you have your own experience with discipline,
Yeah, yeah.
self-discipline. So, I guess what tips or you know for readers or not readers for writers that are listening, like how would you translate like you know using this sports metaphor or whatever into like intentional writing habits and like mindsets, training mindsets, or rituals that you have, or
It's so lovely you bring that up because I was sort of raised with to face life like an athlete. My mother, not only what did she join the resistance, she was quite a person, but she also was a running champion and fast walking champion in her
wow,
own youth in Holland. So,
you're so interesting.
and my dad was a strong swimmer. So they had kind of that view of life with
Hmm.
commitment and discipline and dedication. Um, I didn't have that in my writing. I
Let's
would,
edit out this question.
yeah.
No
I,
discipline.
I tried, but I could never. I had friends who had certain hours in the mornings or certain hours in the evening. Um, when I first started writing, like when I would write articles, when I went to back to school late, and so I had kids when I was in college and writing and papers. I would write at night when they were in bed, you know.
Hmm.
So I learned to grab time when I could, and then when I started writing the first book, I found that there was a certain time in the middle of the day, sort of because I'm not a morning person, but I'd have my coffee, I'd have my breakfast, and a certain time between an 11 and 2 where I'd feel kind of, hey, the story is coming out, and I would write. And with the second one too, what I did try to do was set aside a certain time, 3 or 4 days a week that was free, so that I could sit at the computer and just, as they say, put your butt on the chair in front of the
Hmm.
computer and let the story come, and I'd make notes. But what I do is uh, I tend to think about things a lot. I'll walk around. I love going for walks. I love swimming. When I'm swimming, the thoughts just flow, and I go for walk. My husband, I go for walks on the beach, and then my thoughts flow. So it's the writing's always there, the stories are always there, the exact discipline of sitting down and writing a certain time of the day isn't there. But I do I do write at the same time. I have to say that I will write, at least 3 or 4 days a week. I'll set time aside. So it
I think that's a great answer.
Love it. Yeah.
uh,
Um, Quick question about voice. So, claiming your voice as a writer. I think you've already answered that, but I think for you, what I'm hearing through the stories that you've told already, that your voice as a writer borrows heavily from worldview, right? So the thematic things you talk about, the resilience and the truth telling. Do you think as a writer that those themes that we write about kind of become our voice as writers? Because voice is so like vague, and new
yeah,
writers are always trying to figure out what their voice is, and
yeah.
and it's so hard to define. Like, do you think it's just what we write about and our
It's not,
worldview?
yeah, it's not, I don't start with themes. I don't start that way. I'm an
Mm.
intuitive, and I start with the voice of the story. It's like I'll make notes. I'll make notes my in this last book of, oh, I was swimming. What was I doing at that? I have a strange memory myself. It was just brought up at the conference recently. I remember interactions, emotional interactions. So I'll be thinking, oh, what was going on? For instance, when we moved to Australia, we lived in the bush for a year, and I was really unhappy. What was happening? Oh, that's right. I was walking with Dad, and then I'll make notes
Hmm.
about, and that's how the voice comes up for me first. It's like, oh, I was walking, I was unhappy, and then I'll write notes about that, and then I'll go, well, what was going on that made me unhappy, and how does that fit in with the times. So it's actually, I start more with the emotions and the image. And my writing process is very squiggly, straggly. It starts with, I mean, if you could read my first draft, you'd say, oh my God, that's going to be a book. It's really, but there are these the voice comes up, and I'm a great believer in voice. When I read a memoir, I can tell, I used to grade student papers. I was teaching in grad school, so with psychology, and I can tell when there's a real voice, when something real is being said, so authentic. So I try to start with that authentic voice. And that sounds, when you're first writing, it sounds like a whole bunch of, oh, I was hurting. Oh, I was angry. Oh, it's like, and then I gradually put it together and let it move into more of the theme of, okay, I was in the bush. Yeah, I'm angry. I'm having dreams of escaping back to Amsterdam because I can't fit in, but then in Australia. But then when I get into the pool, I'm with all the swimmers and they love my swimming. And so I make notes like that. And then that comes in, oh, the swimming, that's right. The Aussies love sports and they really like people who are good at them. So then I add that. So it becomes sort of layered. And I'm a slow, laborious writer, is what I'm trying to say,
But
which
isn't
is
it
why
wonderful to know what your process is? Like, it works. You've
well, I
got two
keep
published
saying,
books.
if I were 20 now, I'd know I'd be writing a lot of books, but hey, I've only written the two. But it seems to work because people really like the books. So
Hmm.
my husband's a writer and he writes differently. He has ideas and he writes them on paper and there they are. And I'm always a little envious of that. It's like, oh, mine has to be coming from the depths. Oh my. I think it was the French writer Flaubert. It could have been someone else who said that every word was like a drop of blood from his finger. Sometimes it feels like that,
Squeezed it out. Oh man. Oh, so many good stories. I'm scanning through my questions now on my little notes here to see if there's anything else I want. Eric, do you have any other questions?
I mean, I could ask a million questions, but I think you've answered, sort of gotten to. I don't know. I think you've like addressed a lot of the issues that I brought into this. So yeah.
So I guess we can close with, a lot of our listeners are soul-led, intuitive writers, and they're struggling to start or finish their own stories, whether it's fiction or non, really. What advice would you give them about writing with purpose, especially when they've hit a wall, like they
Yeah,
just are
yeah,
feeling
yeah,
uncomfortable or it's just not coming or they're stuck or
yeah. I would say don't do it alone. We always say that writing is a lonely process, but for me, going to the writers' conferences, being with other writers
mm,
really, really helped me going. It kept me going and helped me. I went to writers' conferences for years before I published my two books, but I wrote articles and I shared, stories at the writers' conferences. And I think being in those communities, I think Erick, you just brought it up, too. It's being with other people. It stimulates your voice and your
mm,
writing and sharing and not being afraid to share when you look at your first writing and you go, oh my God, this is awful. I got to destroy it. No, share it with someone and I can guarantee they'll find one paragraph or one sentence that's beautiful and you can build from that. So
nice.
um, I think for me, almost everything in my life has been join with other people, like-minded people. Find your community. When I'm
Mm,
swimming, I found my swimming community. When I'm writing, I'm with my writing community. When my mother joined the resistance, she was with her resistance community. I think finding our communities is so important.
mm,
So important.
lovely.
Mhm.
Mm. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been a lovely conversation, so meaningful for me. We will definitely put links to both of your books and your audiobook.
Thank you. Thank you.
And all the socials and everything. But the new book that just got launched, Open Turns from Dutch Girl to New Australian, published by She Writes Press. And we'll put all the links in there. Is there anything else you want to say, plug? Where can people find you?
I just want to thank you both. This has been delightful, and I love that we got to talk about the writing itself. This is
Mm-hmm.
just wonderful. And Valerie, all your memoirs are on my shelf to read. So,
Oh, yay! I work
and
at a bookstore. I just hand sold one of my memoirs yesterday, so I felt
oh,
kind of like guilty, like, oh, this is
oh no,
self-indulgent, self-important. But hey,
Oh,
your
somebody was
stories,
asking for a local writer.
our
Which book would
stories
you
are
recommend?
important. Our
I've heard
stories
this
are
lady's written a
important.
great one.
Uh, thank you both so much,
Thank
so
you.
You're
much.
welcome.
Thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
us. Bye for now.
Bye bye.